Second section. We wanted to do kind of a quick informal survey. All right, before we get started, can I do something like this? We'll do a quick informal survey and see how many people would be interested if Mrs. Miller organizes a field trip, obviously not during class because it wouldn't work, to go see Star Wars 3 at the drive-in. So there's just hardly anybody interested. I guess we're going to have to not do it then.
No.
Okay, well, I guess you can tell Professor Stroud that there's a lot of interest.
Oh, yeah.
But he already said to find out, so it wasn't like we were just finding out. So.
Yeah.
And that would be the week after next? It must have to be like the...
Yeah, it's going to have to be.
Yep.
Will it be just our class or
No.
No.
Like the whole school.
the whole
Yeah.
school? The whole school?
We're going to take a bus.
I don't know how
We're
we're
going to
gonna do that.
have, yeah, we're gonna,
I don't think she's really thought through the logistics yet, so.
yeah, well, obviously we're going to have, I can't supervise you all by myself, so we'll have to have like parent volunteers. Oh, the whole school? No. So,
You just see you running around?
yeah. So I was thinking, because we could all, sit in a group on the grass or something up in the front.
You did check to make sure it's coming to the drive-in next week, right?
Stupid bird.
We only have
No.
class for 2 more weeks.
Yeah. Okay, I have to check. If it's not, we might have to phone chain it. We might have to just set a date, see when it comes. Okay. I'll get back to you guys on Monday.
Always look at Mama Carcass.
Ready? Okay. Dimensions. When we're working with our boxes in CSS, you'll notice that we get the box around what we're doing, but our box's size is consistently determined by our content plus our padding. So the border is going to appear around our content with whatever amount of padding there is extra. That's all the bigger our box is going to be. By using dimensions, for the first time, we can actually control directly the size of our boxes. So we're no longer limited to content plus the padding. Now we have actual control. We can do it by centimeter, we can do it by pixel. We can say exactly how big we want our boxes to be. We do this using height and width. That's all we have to worry about. Mark popped his head in for a minute. That's what we're looking for. Find our dimensions. Okay, this is a really boring example, but it gives us a good idea of what's going on. These are 4 division tags, and the only thing that's in them is the one line that says how big they are, and a height and width property making them the size they are. So this first division is simply a box with a plain border that is 50 tall by 400 wide. That's pixels. 40 pixels tall by 50 pixels tall by 400 wide. The second one, 60 tall by 120 wide. The third one, 80 tall by 90 wide. And the last one is 300 tall by 600 wide. And they're just all in order, so they touch each other because there's no margins to keep them apart. And they're not affected by padding because there's so little inside of them. And so all it is us controlling the size. And so if you wanted to put division tags in and change their backgrounds, you could do that. And get, just boxes of different color and boxes of different shape in there. So this is a real simple example. We'll look at the code. But this lets us set the size.
Okay, what's that?
Okay, here it is. We got our first division, second, third, and fourth. And each one has the style set. And I do have the text align to center, which I don't think we've seen before. Text align allows us to cause the text to either align to left or right or center within a division or paragraph or whatever. You can see that we're setting the height and we're setting the width in each one. And that's all we're doing. And the PX afterwards means pixels. You can also set it with a percentage sign, which is going to give you percentages, which we're going to look at in a second. And you can set it with like centimeters, which gets a little bit weird. I use it in some examples, but I never use centimeters in real settings, I always use pixels because you get a lot better control. Because who knows what a centimeter is on a screen? I'm not even sure where they came up with the idea of doing that. Not 1 pixel by 1 pixel. You can, it'll be really small. Here we're talking about pixels and percentages. Okay, in our second example, we're going to look at some dimensions that are based on percentages. What I'm going to do in this next example is I'm going to create one division that has a solid size, just like the one we just saw. I think it's 400 pixels tall, and then it just fills up the width of the screen the other way. And then I'm going to take and add 4 divisions to it that are each a percentage of the parent division. And we're going to play with this one a little bit. We're going to change some of it because it's kind of hard to see what's happening. When you're doing a percentage, you can only do a percentage of the width of the browser if you don't have any container, because as far as your browser is concerned, it has a width, but it does not have a height. Okay? So if you say you want something to be 50% the width of your browser, and the browser says, well, the browser is this wide, it must be this big. But if you say you want it to be 50% of the height, it doesn't understand, because as far as it cares, the page goes on forever. And if you just start typing text, it will just scroll on forever. So when you say 50% of the height, it's 50% of infinity, and it doesn't know what to do. So this is a little bit hard to see, but we have our main division is this blue box here. Okay, and that one doesn't have a label on it. That one's the full width of the browser plus it's 400 pixels tall. All these other divisions that you're going to see, and you'll notice they overlap. This is really interesting. They overlap with the other division, so you can put things on top of each other. These are based on percentages of that division. Okay, so this box is 50% the height and 40% the width of that parent box, that parent division. This one is 60% by 12%. This one is 80 by 90, and if we scroll down, there's another one, 100 by 60. Okay, if we change the dimensions of that initial division, all of these are going to change along with it. But even cooler, we can do this live because we're dealing with, it's set to 400 is its height, but its width is determined by the browser. So you'll notice that all the divisions change, but their height does not. If we change the height, it's going to stay the same, but their width changes because the width is set to the browser. Okay? Is that cool? Okay.
My eyes hurt.
Stop making people sick.
Okay, now if we go in and we change this initial one from 400 to 40 pixels. Everything adjusted because the single absolute division got 1/10 the size. All of the things that were using relative percentages of its size shrunk with it. So if you look down here, this one is 100% the height of this, which is 40 pixels. So this one is 40 pixels. This one is 50%, so it's 20 pixels now. You can figure out what it is, but all these numbers still apply because they're relative. Now, one thing you'll notice, all of these in the code are contained within this blue division, but because of their relative size, they end up going outside of it because it has an absolute size. It can't go above 40 pixels. These, by the nature of being 50, 60, 80, and 100 percentages of its size put together, must be larger. It allows it to go outside the box. So it's actually spilling out of the box. If we were to make these all add up to a total of 100, they would act inside the box exactly the way you would expect. Bring this up to 150. And because they're percentages, we never have to worry about figuring out what the pixels are going to be because it does all that for us. So we're going to make all these 25. the accuracy isn't that great. This is actually caused because there's overlap, because the pixels do not completely overlap on the borders, so they go over slightly. You'd have to do it just a tiny bit smaller to make it really fit. We can see that the left to right is still consistent. And if we take the main one up, it all changes together. Okay. All right. Now that we're able to dimension, now we're able to make boxes any size we want. Now the next thing we naturally want to do is we want to be able to put them wherever we want. Using CSS, we have the ability to position any element to absolute or relative spots in the page. What does that mean? An absolute location, just like the absolute dimensions. If we say it's 20 pixels by 20 pixels, it's exactly 20 pixels by 20 pixels. But if we say it's 20% of something else, it's going to change if that other thing changes. Same thing with the positioning. With absolute positioning, you say, I want it at such and such a pixel on the screen. This is where that division paragraph tag is going to appear. If you put a relative position, what it's going to say is, okay, from the position where I would put this item, if there was nothing else going on, where would it go? So if you had a whole bunch of paragraphs in a row, and you wanted one paragraph to appear somewhat to the right of its natural position, you would just do a relative position and shift it a little bit to the right, right plus 1 centimeter or plus 50 pixels. And you won't have to worry about where it would end up in the page. Otherwise, it'll just move to the right from its natural position. In this example, all we have is one division. The division has an orange background and some text in it. It is 150 pixels by 250 pixels. This is it. It's obviously this is it. And but using absolute positioning, it is 8 centimeters off the top and 5 centimeters off the left. This is obviously where the centimeters thing falls apart. No one knows where it refers to centimeters at. It doesn't refer to 5 centimeters on your LCD screen. It doesn't refer to it on your CRT screen. It sure doesn't refer to it up here where it's like almost 12 inches. So it's a really weird way to refer to spacing, but it comes from the publishing industry where they actually use centimeters for some reason. But it gives you an idea of how far it is. You can definitely do this with pixels, put it 400 pixels off the top or whatever. But there's nothing in this space. It is completely empty. There's one box up here, which is the heading box that has the title in it. But all this space, all this around is completely empty. This division is 150 pixels by 250 pixels floating wherever we tell it to go. And what we do is when we specify location, we do it off the top and off the left, and it gives us, we specify to the leading corner, the top left corner of whatever box we're working with. That's the corner we position. Everything else expands out from there. So if I was to make this 200 pixels tall, the bottom would expand. If I was to make it wider, it would come out to the right. It would not, it's not centered. In other words, it expands out from the top left. Okay. Look at relative positioning. Okay, in this circumstance, we're positioned, I used 5 centimeters again, so it's a little bit higher up than the last one was. But instead of being absolute, this one is relative. And so this one is set to start 40% over from the left-hand side. So the middle is right about here, that would be 50%, so this is just a little bit left of there. And it's based on the size of the browser. Means as the browser changes, so does its position. You notice once the browser gets to a certain size, the 40% stays, because the 40% is the distance between here and here, and it's the leading corner. It doesn't try to keep the entire thing within the browser. It just knows you want the corner to start at 40%, and so it moves along with it. If you were to make the dimensions change along with having a relative position, it would move over and shrink at the same time. So if we look at the code of first one, this is the absolute position box, the one that does not move. Our positioning information is here, right at the bottom of the division declaration. We got position absolute. This is how we tell it it's going to be positioned. We say absolute, and then we have top and left, and it's just the distance from the top and the left. So it's really easy to work with. And then in our second example, which was not absolute, we put relative, and again, here's the 5 centimeters, and here's the 40%. Now, the 5 centimeters is not 5 centimeters from the top. If we were working with absolute, it would be from the top. In this case, the 5 centimeters starts just below the H1 box that was at the top, because it's 5 centimeters from where it would put this division if there was no positioning information. Does that make sense to everybody? Let me take it out. Okay. This is the same page with no positioning information whatsoever. This point right there is all the way to the left, and who knows how far that is, we'll say 1 centimeter, off the top of the page. This is where it thinks that this should go, and this is where it will go, because this is what it's doing. So when we go in and we put in that positioning information, this 5 centimeters is from that position, 5 centimeters below where it thinks it's going to start. So if you were to add something else in above this, it would shift down, but maintain 5 centimeters of nothing between it and the thing above it. Okay, that makes sense. But if you did absolute and you put a whole bunch of things in, they could overlap. But with relative, it's not going to let you overlap, just because it knows that new things are coming in. It's going to space out. So there's reasons to use it. It does come in really handy for certain things. If you just want to have a barrier that you can do. And you can do the same thing from the left. You could say, if it was next to an element, you don't have to use a percentage there. You can use it in any circumstance. Okay. One last example that I want to double check. I don't have as much done on it as I was hoping. Okay, that's actually it for today. Actually, we finished up right where I was thinking. I wanted to keep it a little bit light because we had a number of people who didn't hit the CSS last time, and I know this is going to be a big blast of information. And I want to give everybody a chance to work on this stuff. We have covered, with minor exception, all of the actual new code you're going to have to know. There's a little bit more that we're going to hit next week. But it is very, very minor. We're going to be looking at just ways to apply things we've learned from here on in. You pretty much have the bulk of both XHTML and CSS under your belt at this point. There is a couple of advanced XHTML things that we're not going to talk about. One is forms. Forms requires you to have a server on the back end that you can send information back, and because we can't do that, no one has access to that kind of equipment, we're not going to worry about forms because they only make sense in that context. And other than that, there's a couple rare tags or really difficult tags that we're not worrying about, and we are going to look at just a couple of specialty items. But other than that, we're just going to be looking at applying these things. So at this point, the technical part is pretty much over. It's all style and design from here on in, which is only 2 weeks. So that's it. We're done for this week. And you have a little bit of time. I know some people I'd like to get people out on the computers and try to make some pages, because I know people have been trying to do that and have been having a hard time. So if you can use this time for that, that'd be great. If you need to go, you can go. We will be here until we're done. So, okay.
Do not leave without telling me.
See you there.
Oh, by the way, guys, just one thing. The Star Wars thing, I think we're going to limit it to the people that are in this class. And
And it says w3schools.com. They